wanted to be loved. And through all of this, just know, Breezy, you're loved.
It was on the 11th that Riley's Jeep was found. It was a helicopter that managed to snag it, and it looked in poor shape. Both tires on the passenger side had been punctured, and the way they were, they could tell the car hadn't been moving when the tires had been punctured. And also, all the windows were down. So what does that tell you? Well, it tells you that there was no accidents. There was nothing, though, found inside. In fact, staged would be the word that would come up. The Jeep had been sort of covered, as if someone wanted to, to hide it. And it was found 40 minutes from Eureka, in a sort of reservoir. Cherry Creek, they call it. Oh, they'll soon be calling it Cherry Desert. And still, the search continued, though, as the Jeep gave them not a whole lot.
Braylon Otteson and Riley Powell were last seen leaving Tooele on their way home to Eureka. Their Jeep was found partially hidden in some trees about a mile south of Cherry Creek Reservoir. Police say that they now believe the Jeep was dropped there intentionally and not by the two missing teens.
One thing they did locate, though, on the Jeep was a camouflaged tow strap. Like, the Jeep had been towed to where it was, so that kind of, it gives you a clue as to how it got there. But it seemed like foul play was, at play now. And so the frenzy to get these two beloved young people back was even higher. The families were there every single day. Except Riley's mother, though. She doesn't really get into the whole thing too much. They were estranged. Riley was brought up by his granddad. Apparently, bit of. And things take an even stranger turn when Riley's mother's boyfriend, he reports to the police that he saw someone towing that Jeep around the time of the disappearance. Maybe he could explain why Riley's Jeep ended up where it did and what happened before. The police started investigating Riley's mother and her boyfriend, Misty and Lee. They weren't incredibly forthcoming, though, which always just makes the police want to look at you more, but nothing. That is until the 25th of March, 2018. Riley and Breezy, they'd been missing for about 3 months at this stage. At just a routine traffic stop, someone was pulled over. That someone was Morgan Henderson. The Morgan Henderson who was one of the last people to see Riley and Breezy alive. Morgan was pulled over for speeding, and she failed a drug test. Upon searching her car, they found an axe, a rifle, and knives. She was then taken in, and after feeling, quote, tremendous guilt, unquote, she told what really happened. It was not good. Riley, Breezy, and Morgan, they had been hanging out that night, and then Jared came home. But, before I get into what exactly happened, who the shit is Jared Baum? A real sack of shit, that's who. In 2018, he was 41 years old, well known to the popo in the area, though he kept to himself among the general population. He had quite the history. At age 15, he had walked into a Burger King with a big old gun, a big old iron, and he started blasting. The idea was to rob the place and kill everyone. Now, he didn't kill anyone. He was arrested. He was charged as an adult. The attempted murder charge was dismissed, and he went to prison. He took a sweet L plea deal, though. He would be in and out of prison, actually, his whole life, usually from parole violations stemming from that one incident. He had quite a few tattoos. This picture here tells you really all you need to know about how much he sucks ass. He has a lot of tattoos. Well, obviously the swastika, Iron Cross, a lot of Nordic tattoos, and get this, apparently he practices Odinism, like some, ancient Norse religion. As usual, the religion itself is like very old and it's not racist at all. But then of course Nazis come along and they fucking ruin everything. Jared and Morgan would do rituals, drawing runes and symbols in blood, which investigators would come to believe was his attempt to control her. But out of all this weird shit, one thing that really concerned Morgan, and again later investigators, was that he had a lot of tattoos of headstones with initials in them. Morgan thought they were previous victims. Serial killer, fuck's sake.
We can't do anything for it, we can't. We can't make any promises.
So when he came home that December night, and boy oh boy did he come home, He found Riley and Breezy with Morgan and he was none too pleased, telling her, "I told you you couldn't have any guy friends." He then bound both Riley and Breezy, hands, feet, and duct taped them, and placed them in the back of Riley's truck. Then Jared, with Morgan in the passenger seat, not having a clue what was going on, they all drove. Jared was joking and smiling the entire time. They eventually arrived at the Tintic mine. Once a massive mine in the area, now abandoned. He beat Riley and stabbed him before throwing him in the mine, saying, "Goodbye, Riley." He then cut Breezy's throat, and she too went in the mine. Morgan told all of this to the police, and the young couple's bodies were found. This was on the 27th of March, about 100 feet down. Their hands were still tied behind their backs. Jared Baum was arrested that very next day.
This crime scene tape is still up there behind me. That's where they were found. Again, we don't know if it is Breezy and Riley. The identification is pending at the moment, but the families say that the fight is just beginning.
Morgan was arrested on suspicion of obstruction of justice. Jared Baum, well, among other things, he was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. He pleaded not guilty.
The man accused of killing 2 Tooele teens is expected to be inside a Provo courtroom today.
So that is incredibly disturbing. It would be a long time, though, before the trial would actually kick off, like a whole 4 years later. As in, like, now, like 2022 now. The gearing up for the trial took so long was because, well, the death penalty was on the cards, and then off them, much to the family's chagrin. Whether Riley and Breezy could be referred to as children or not, the judge ruled young adults. He wouldn't allow Jared to be called a white supremacist, whether some medical records be used or not in relation to Morgan, and Morgan who, in a plea deal, would testify against Jared. After all, pretty much the whole prosecution's case rested on her. This was in return for her being a free woman once the Jared Baum case was finished.
Morgan Henderson is Jared Baum's former girlfriend, and she's the only person who witnessed the murder of 2 teens near Eureka.
It was the most horrible sound I've ever heard.
And there wasn't really a whole lot of evidence against him. It was mostly circumstantial. The whole, like I said, it really all rested on Morgan Henderson's shoulders and how what she said matched with what the police found.
He'd never been mad at me like that. That had never happened before. It felt scary. It was clear something was really wrong. So you're out there in the middle of the night. A few people are tied up, and so it was scary. Riley asked if he could kiss his girlfriend, and then Breezy said no, and she started crying. I heard Riley say, "I'm dying," and he was gurgling. And that's when I realized that he wasn't hitting Riley, he was stabbing Riley. It was the most horrible sound I've ever heard. He's got this huge grin on his face, like he's enjoying himself. And he was, he did later, he's laughed about it. He said that was like lambs to the slaughter. They didn't even fight.
The trial would last a month.
It was an emotional day for the families of Breezy and Riley. It's been more than 4 years since their deaths, and their families say it's taken too long for this trial to happen. The first witness to take the stand, Morgan Lewis. She was Baum's girlfriend at the time of Riley and Breezy's deaths.
How did he kill Riley?
He stabbed him.
How did he kill Breezy?
He cut her throat.
What did he do with their bodies?
He threw them in a mine.
How do you know this is what happened?
Because I saw it.
Lewis says she told police what happened on her own.
I wanted them to know what happened. I wanted them to know where Riley and Breezy were. The police had come and raided our house and left and didn't find anything, so they moved on. Like, he got away with it, and I was not okay with that. And I felt a lot of guilt and shame.
Jared's defense went with, well, Morgan is where you're getting this whole spiel from. What, you gonna believe her? Come on. They said she couldn't distinguish reality from hallucinations, that she had schizoaffective disorder, bipolar disorder, and depression, but wasn't taking any medication.
Baum denied he murdered the teens, and through court documents, his attorney claimed it was Henderson and an unnamed friend who murdered the teens. Henderson's own sister claimed both murdered the two teens. As for a possible motive, friends told the detective Baum was angry.
You said that Riley raped Morgan?
Henderson refused to answer questions from the defense, who are seeking to learn more about her involvement.
She'd also received in the past shock therapy for depression, which they said affected her memory. That actually could be true. And she used mushrooms, allegedly, all the time. That was their whole gambit, just trying to discredit her. But at the end of the day, the biggest thing against Morgan was that she broke Jared's rules. That's why the prosecution said Jared brutally murdered two innocent kids.
Morgan said she saw Jared stab Riley in the groin, in the chest, in the head, in the throat, in the face. Riley started to gurgle. He said, "I'm dying."
Was there a dominant one in the relationship? He said, yeah, Morgan. Also noteworthy, so that somebody who doesn't have any sort of interest in the outcome said, no, Morgan was the one that was the dominant one in that relationship.
It took 3 days of deliberations before the jury returned its verdict.
State of Utah versus Jared William Baum. We, the jury in the above entitled case, unanimously find beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant Jared William Baum is count 1 guilty of aggravated murder, count 2 guilty of aggravated murder, count 3 guilty of aggravated kidnapping, count 4 guilty of aggravated kidnapping, count 5
guilty on all counts. Jared Baum is scheduled to be sentenced on the 1st of June. It will very likely be life in prison.
The death penalty was taken away from us, and that's what we wanted. This is the next best thing, so we have no complaints. At least I don't. So, very good today. Very good outcome.
It's been a journey, so it's, that wait was painful, but in the moment, I look back and it was just a blurb through all of this. 4 years, we searched for 3 months. We waited 4 years for justice for these kids. So at the end of the day, we can wait, and it was worth the wait.
It's an incredibly tragic case, For the two, just a lovely young couple murdered for what would be the actually, that is no reason at all. Jared Baum was a crazy person, someone who loved being a big evil bastard. Well, he'll be in prison for the rest of his unnatural life, but he seems like someone who, gets on great in there. He'd been involved with the various white gangs, as you can imagine. He was even linked to a prison shanking and prison riots before, so you can imagine he's only licking his chops. I imagine that for him, going to prison will be just like his penis. No biggie. So we will leave it there.
Okay.
God damn, if there's ever time to bring this back, this is it. Snap, snap. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time to do so. And be here with this guy once again at the end of the video. It really means a lot that you're here. I know I say that every time, but I mean it. So thank you. It's still weird to me that after doing this for however many years, 4 years now, it's people still watch my videos. It's not kind of bizarre. I don't think it's hit me. Yeah, after doing it for so long, but here we are. Thank you. Here, go on. I'll see you as always real soon in the next little video, as always. So please, take care of yourselves. So love you. Okay. And welcome. My name is Mike, and in this little video, what I have for you today is the story of James Fairweather. Though if he was anything, he would be a hurricane. but like a small one. This is a story which takes us to cool Colchester, a city in England's east, right between the booty of Norwich and the butthole of London. In 2014, there were worries, especially as Colchester is reportedly quite a safe place to live. Not then, because Mr. Gawky was lurking. Let's give it a go. For this whole story, we're going to the oldest town in England. I mean, oldest recorded town. Let that be a lesson. Write shit down. People have been living there since the Paleolithic days. Remember them? That's the real good old days, when people butt-ass naked surf down woolly mammoth trunks and that sort of thing. The Flintstones was a documentary in this scenario. It was the first Roman city in Britain, and basically it's still hung around till today. Colchester has a population of about 200,000 people, and growing. Though this tale didn't help at all. But it seems like a lovely little city to be living in. Oh, what a place. It even has 2 Tesco's. And as you can see from our bird's eye view, thanks Google, there's Menzies Park in Big Collie Sea. It's a green-ass city. This story will paint it red. There is one green that's fairly central in Colchester called Castle Park. Because, well, there's a castle there. I mean, where else would you build a castle if not in Castle Park? Even I think that joke is stupid. Let's go there in the early hours of Saturday, the 29th of March, 2014. There, something pretty horrific was discovered. Laying on the grass, the body of a man completely covered in blood. This was reported to the Colchester police at 5:45 a.m. The body was that of Jim Atfield, and he had been stabbed more than 100 times, including the eye. It was completely shocking from the get-go how gruesome this has been in, as I said previously, a nice, quiet market town. Jim was actually alive when he was found, but he passed away 45 minutes later. Jim was 33 years old, a father of 4, and local Colchester pet. He was a happy, funny guy, though he'd had it rough in recent years. A car accident 4 years earlier in 2012 left him with brain damage, and he had significant mobility issues.
Well, I had a coma and I was in the right way. My mind was alright, but my body sometimes does me down. Some people see you've got a dysphoria and think, oh, you must be stupid.
This really affected the trajectory of his life, and at the time he was living in sheltered accommodation. But he was on the upswing, he'd come to terms with his disabilities, and he was doing just fine.
I don't think that there is any clear motive for what has happened to James, and we would appeal to anybody who knows anything about this terrible murder to come forward and speak to the police.
He had gone out for a few scoops on the 29th of March. He had gone out to the River Lodge pub, closed today. Seems he had been out by himself, looks like a quiet enough spot, and he had wandered home after midnight. Going through Castle Park would be a shortcut for him. Jim had actually been seen not long before he was found. At around 1 a.m, a passerby saw Jim lying on the grass, went up to him to see if he was alright. Jim was pissed, but okay, and the passerby just warned him to be careful. That was at about 1 a.m, so you've got almost 5 hours between then and 5:45 a.m. when he was attacked.
And we've conducted a post-mortem now which lasted 8.5 hours on Sunday. He has 102 separate knife wounds on his body. And we are appealing to the public for information in relation to this event. If there's anyone out there who knows anything about it, if someone came home with blood on their clothing, if someone came home with injuries they didn't go out with, if someone's got a knife missing from their knife block, then we'd urge you to contact us. Or if anyone has any information at all who can identify who was responsible for this, then we'd urge the public to contact us.
A fair few people had come and gone, and Castle Park, it lies between a good few neighbourhoods. and one of them had attacked Jim as he was laying, probably dozing off on the grass of Castle Park. And he had a number of defensive wounds, so he had tried to fight off whoever this was, but the investigation, appeals, and coverage were extensive at the time. The police were reinforced, trying to find out who did this, but nothing was really left behind at the scene. No forensics, no weapons, and Jim didn't have anyone who had it out for him.
A brutal attack, a sustained attack, and this was a very vulnerable man.
Yes, since Jane's accident in 2010, he's very fragile and would have easily been knocked over, which makes this attack even more macabre. The person who carried it out would have definitely been covered in blood, and they definitely had a weapon. We're very keen to locate that weapon, and if anybody saw somebody on the Saturday morning with blood on them, we would be keen to hear from them.
We should remind people 102 stab wounds.
This terrorized the people of Colchester, but gradually the impact faded away. People were generally just hoping, okay, this was a perfect event, let's hope it's a one and done. It was not done. It was 3 months later, on the 17th of June 2014, that there was another attack in Colchester, very similar to the first one. 31-year-old University of Essex student Nahid Al-Mania was, quite simply, walking to college last Tuesday morning, 10:30 a.m. She had been walking along Salary Brook Trail, just on the outskirts of town. It's a little shortcut along some fields. And it was there she was found. A nearby man had been out, he was looking, he was having a goo, his cat had run off. So he was, doing a with a friend, and they came across her. Her body, and her face specifically, was in an even more horrific state than Jim's had been, but she too had been stabbed to death. Nahid was from Saudi Arabia, studying English as part of her PhD at the University of Essex. Her brother studied there too. They had only been living in England for about 6 months. She always walked to university with her brother. Always. Except his death. They lost stab wounds to Nahid's body, but the wounds were worse and more horrific. Almost like the killer was practicing and getting better. Eyes, again, had been the target. The investigators knew because her sunglasses had been removed to get at her eyes specifically. Her face was bloody, her eye was hanging out, and her skull fractured. Her skull fracture was believed to have been from when the killer attacked her from behind and dragged her to the ground. Again, there was little to nothing left behind, witnesses or anything to give the dogs a direction. One simple thing was that someone had seen, quote, a lad wearing an Italian jacket. Mamma fucking mia.
Today I'm able to reveal that we are seeking to identify a man who was seen within the area here in the Salary Brook Trail. He was seen on Tuesday morning around about 10:20, between 10:20 and 10:40 a.m. and he was wearing what can only be described as a distinctive jacket. The male is described as being in his late teens to 30 years of age. He had thick, dark hair, which is described as mop-like on top, perhaps 2 to 3 inches tall. He was quite short. He was clean-shaven, of average build, and of tanned appearance, not wearing any glasses.
So 3 months later, another attack, very similar. You got panic on the streets of Colchester, mate.
In our last programme, we appealed for your help to catch the killer of James Atfield. You remember that James was murdered in a brutal knife attack in Colchester that happened at the end of March. He had been stabbed 102 times. Well, only a few weeks after our appeal, Saudi Arabian student Nahid Al-Mania was also murdered in Colchester. The 31-year-old's body was found a mere 2 miles from where James was killed. There is clearly at least one extremely dangerous person out there who needs to be caught, and fast.
Once again, it was on the news, the appeals went out. Nada.
She has been murdered in a way that can only be termed a brutal and savage attack. There are some obvious similarities between her death and that of James Atfield, who was stabbed to death in Colchester on March 29th of this year. And this is a possibility that is being explored.
Are you investigating the possibility that there could be a serial killer on the loose in Colchester?
As I say, at this time, we remain open-minded
as to whether or not the two murder investigations are actually scientifically linked. The evidence at this time does not indicate that they are, but we remain open-minded.
Extra officers are on patrol to reassure the people of this town who've been shocked by two frenzied knife attacks in the space of a few months.
There were suspects, a number of men were taken in for questioning regarding the murder, but eventually they were released. They couldn't tie any of them to anything, but there were hundreds and hundreds of interviews.
If you heed the advice that's given, then you'll be alright.
The police were trying to find any lead they could.
Police are still trying to establish whether Colchester just happened to have two completely separate brutal killings, or whether they're the work of just one person.
Now, I wish I could say it was down to dogged, and dare I say jolly good detective work. It wasn't at all how this came to a close. It was down to good old luck and a eagle-eyed dog walker. In May of 2015, almost a year after the brutal murder of Nahid, a dog walker spotted someone wearing an Italian jacket, standing on a bridge near Salary Brook Trail. Michelle was her name. She was out that day walking the pupper, and she saw him wearing that Italian jacket and thought he was very creepy, weird, and creepy. This was, after all, less than a year after something very dark happened in that specific area. It was on the same day of the week as Nahid was killed at the same time of day in the morning. The police were called, and the man was now not on the bridge. When the police arrived, poof, he had gone like a fart in the wind. They had their chance and they blew it. He lived to strike another day. Until Michelle was like, yeah, he's right over there. He's in the bushes. Michelle came very, very close to being the next victim. Lesson here being, if you see somebody being creepy, they are probably creepy. And it was this little goof troop over here. 15-year-old James Fairweather. He was arrested. He had rubber gloves on, and in his pocket a knife was found. He was taken in and questioned about the knife. That's why he was arrested to begin with. But he just came out and confessed directly to the murders of Jim and Nahid.
I saw him. It was where it was laying on the grass. And so I was like, just fast asleep, swear he was drunk. And he goes, he's the one. Do it. So I went up to him. Can I stand up?
Yes.
Went up to him. Stood over like that. So I stabbed him first there. I've done it a few times.
But let it be known, he was simply the instrument, the real culprit to these horrific murders behind him. The voices in his head, my friends. Arrest those, baby.
The voices are talking to me. You need to make a statement, so we're going to come and get you. You need to do it. I stabbed him first there. I've done it a few times. While I was doing that, my voices were laughing and louder and louder.
James would later deny murdering anyone, saying the voices in his head had tricked him into confessing to something he did not do. Voices in my head, which you wished. Later, evidence linked him to Nahid's murder. And that is when he did confess. But he confessed to manslaughter. After all, he said he was not in the driver's seat. He also didn't remember anything about the murders. Once again saying he didn't remember anything when he clearly demonstrated for the police how he gouged out eyes. James Fairweather was born in 1998, and he was a local from Colchester, Essex. Growing up, he had a normal childhood, was well liked, nothing off about him. He didn't do the animal killing, the bedwetting, the fire starting that we tend to see in serial killers. He was gentle, and he was described as gentle and introverted. But when he went extroverted, he really went extroverted. He was in a darts club with his dad. He was generally described as people spoke highly of him. It seems though, as he grew, got older, and especially as he went to Colchester High School, that's when the metaphorical shit hit the metaphorical fan. He was bullied in school, bullied for his big ol' ears. The names given were Dumbo, FA Cup, which I like that one, What other lovely nicknames can you be given because of his big ears? Let me know in the comments below. It also seems his grandmother, who was very close to him, her passing, that really affected him too. Wow. The psychologists who met with him and described those two things as being, you know, the catalysts, they really knocked that one out of the park. Wow. I guess we're very lucky that only a small fraction of people are bullied in school and have one of their grandparents pass away. Otherwise, we'd be up to our necks in serial killing of white bags. Obviously, there was a lot more going through his head than his granny dying and being bullied for his big ass ears. Like in the cases of, you know, many killers, there's never going